The coffee maker gurgled like a dying animal as I stood in my kitchen at 6:30 on a Saturday morning, watching my wife Sienna pack her overnight bag with the precision of a surgeon. Designer lingerie folded just so. The expensive perfume I'd bought her for Christmas tucked carefully between silk scarves. All for a weekend of emotional healing with her ex-husband Blake. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. You know how this looks, right? I said, leaning against the granite countertop that had cost us 3 months of mortgage payments. Sienna didn't look up from her packing. Her blonde hair fell in perfect waves around her shoulders, the kind of effortless beauty that had made me fall for her 8 years ago. Back when I thought I was the luckiest guy in the world. David, we've been through this. Her voice carried that patient tone she used when explaining simple concepts to difficult clients. Blake is going through a really hard time right now. The divorce from Jessica nearly destroyed him financially, and emotionally, he's just broken. So broken that he needs his ex-wife to spend weekends at his lakeside house to fix him? She finally looked at me, those green eyes flashing with irritation. It's called compassion, David. Maybe you should try it sometime. I took a sip of coffee and let the bitterness coat my tongue. Compassion. Right. And the fact that you're packing lingerie for this compassion mission? I pack lingerie for every trip. You know that. She zipped the bag with more force than necessary. Besides, Blake's place has a hot tub. I might want to relax after spending all weekend listening to his problems. In lingerie. In a bathing suit, David. God, you're so paranoid. I wasn't paranoid. I was observant. There's a difference, though. I was starting to realize that pointing this out would only make me look more paranoid in her eyes. How long has this been going on? I asked. What do you mean? These compassion weekends. How long? Sienna hefted her bag onto her shoulder and checked her reflection in the hallway mirror. About 3 months. You know this, David. I've been completely transparent about helping Blake through his healing process. 3 months. 3 months of weekends where my wife disappeared to play therapist to her ex-husband while I stayed home, grading papers, and wondering when my marriage had turned into a part-time arrangement. And how much longer is his healing process going to take? She paused at the front door, her hand on the brass handle we'd picked out together when we bought this house, back when we made decisions together, back when we were a team. As long as it takes, she said. A good person doesn't abandon someone they care about just because it's inconvenient. The implication hung in the air between us like smoke. I wasn't a good person because I had a problem with this arrangement. I was selfish, small-minded, insecure. What if I said I wasn't comfortable with this anymore? Sienna turned to face me fully, and for a moment I thought I saw something flicker across her features. Guilt, maybe. Or fear. But it was gone so quickly I might have imagined it. Then I'd say you need to decide what kind of man you want to be, she said quietly. The kind who supports his wife when she's trying to help someone, or the kind who makes everything about his own insecurities. She opened the door, letting in the crisp October air. I'll be back Sunday evening. There's leftover pasta in the fridge. And then she was gone, leaving me standing in my kitchen with cold coffee and the growing certainty that my marriage was circling the drain. I walked to the window and watched her BMW pull out of our driveway. She'd be at Blake's house in 40 minutes. They'd probably start with mimosas on his deck overlooking the lake. Maybe some light conversation about his emotional journey. By evening, they'd be in that hot tub she'd mentioned. And by night, I shook my head. That way lay madness. Instead, I went to my home office and opened my laptop. As a senior systems analyst for Meridian Tech, I spent most of my time solving problems through careful observation and logical deduction. Maybe it was time to apply those skills to my personal life. I started with social media, Sienna's Instagram was a carefully curated collection of motivational quotes, real estate success stories, and photos of her looking effortlessly beautiful in various locations around our town. But scrolling back 3 months, I noticed something interesting. The photos from her weekend trips weren't tagged with locations. Every other post was meticulously tagged. The restaurant where she'd had lunch, the coffee shop where she'd met a client, even the grocery store where she'd bought organic vegetables. But the weekend photos? Nothing. I opened Facebook. Same pattern. Lots of posts about taking time to help others heal and the importance of compassion in our broken world, but no specifics about where these compassionate acts were taking place. My phone buzzed. A text from Sienna. Made it safely. Blake is in rough shape today. Might be a long weekend. Don't wait up tomorrow night. Don't wait up. Like I was her father instead of her husband. I set the phone aside and opened a new browser window. Time for some real detective work. Blake Callahan wasn't hard to find online. His LinkedIn profile showed him as a wellness consultant and life transformation coach, which seemed like a fancy way of saying unemployed. His Facebook was public, probably because he was trying to build his coaching brand. Lots of posts about healing and growth and finding your authentic self. The kind of pseudo-spiritual nonsense that made me want to throw things. But then I found something interesting. A photo from 2 weeks ago. Blake and Sienna at what looked like a restaurant, both of them laughing at something off-camera. The caption read, "Grateful for the people who see your true self and love you anyway." Healing. Authenticity. Blessed. The timestamp showed it was posted on a Saturday evening, one of Sienna's compassion weekends. I scrolled further back, more photos. Blake and Sienna hiking. Blake and Sienna at what looked like a wine tasting. Blake and Sienna sitting by a fireplace, her head resting on his shoulder. My hands were shaking as I closed the laptop. I spent the rest of Saturday in a fog, trying to grade papers and failing miserably. Every time I started to focus, my mind would drift back to those photos. The easy intimacy between them. The way Sienna's face looked in those pictures. Relaxed and happy in a way I hadn't seen in months. Sunday dragged by like a wounded animal. I cleaned the house, did laundry, made a grocery run. Normal weekend activities that felt surreal under the circumstances. I kept checking my phone, but there were no more texts from Sienna. She came home at 8:30 Sunday evening, looking refreshed and glowing in a way that made my stomach clench. "How was your weekend?" I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral. "Exhausting," she said, dropping her bag by the door. "Blake is really struggling. We spent most of the time just talking through his issues. I'm emotionally drained." She did look tired, but it was the kind of tiredness that comes after a satisfying workout, not the bone-deep exhaustion of dealing with someone else's problems. "What kind of issues?" "Oh, trust problems from his divorce, fear of intimacy, feeling like he's not worthy of love." She kicked off her shoes and padded toward the kitchen. "Standard post-divorce trauma. And you're qualified to help him with that?" She turned to look at me, and there was something sharp in her expression. "I'm qualified to be a friend, David. I'm qualified to listen and offer support. Not everything requires a degree. I just think maybe he should see an actual therapist. He's not ready for that yet. He needs to feel safe first, and I'm one of the few people he trusts completely." Of course he trusted her completely. She was beautiful, successful, and apparently willing to spend every weekend listening to his problems while wearing lingerie and sitting in hot tubs. "Did you eat dinner?" I asked. "Blake cooked. He's actually gotten pretty good at it." She opened the refrigerator and pulled out a bottle of white wine. "We had salmon with this amazing herb crust, much better than leftover pasta." The casual cruelty of that comment hit me like a slap. I'd offered to cook something nice for her return, but she'd said not to bother, that she'd probably be too tired to eat much. "I'm glad you had a good meal," I said. She poured herself a glass of wine and took a long sip. It wasn't about the meal, David. It was about creating a safe space for healing. Sometimes that means going the extra mile. Right, the extra mile. We went to bed without talking much more. Sienna fell asleep quickly, but I lay awake staring at the ceiling and thinking about those Facebook photos, about the way she'd looked at Blake, about the growing distance between us that seemed to expand every weekend. Monday morning brought the usual routine: coffee, shower, the drive to Meridian Tech's glass and steel offices in the business district. But nothing felt usual anymore. I kept thinking about Sienna's weekend stories, looking for inconsistencies, analyzing her words like code that needed debugging. My colleague, Jenny Martinez, stopped by my cubicle around 10 with a cup of coffee and her usual Monday morning gossip. "You look like hell, David," she said, perching on the edge of my desk. "Rough weekend?" Something like that. Jenny was one of the few people at work who knew about my personal life. We'd started around the same time 5 years ago, and she'd been a good friend through various work crises and personal dramas. She was also observant, which made her dangerous when I was trying to keep things private. Sienna still doing her Mother Teresa routine with the ex-husband? I looked up sharply. What do you mean by that? Come on, David. You've mentioned it a few times. The weekend therapy sessions. It's a little weird, don't you think? She's just trying to help someone who's going through a hard time. Uh-huh. Jenny sipped her coffee and studied my face. And how do you feel about your wife spending weekends with her ex-husband? It's not like that. What's it like? I stared at my computer screen, where lines of code blurred together into meaningless symbols. I don't know anymore. Jenny was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "David, can I tell you something without you getting mad?" Probably not, but go ahead. My sister went through something similar about 2 years ago. Her husband started spending a lot of time with his ex-wife, supposedly helping her through some crisis. Turned out the crisis was that she wanted him back, and he was more than happy to be wanted. That's different. Is it? I didn't answer, because I wasn't sure it was different. I wasn't sure of anything anymore. "Look," Jenny said, "I'm not trying to stir up trouble. But maybe you should trust your instincts on this one. If something feels wrong, it probably is." She left me alone with that thought and a growing knot in my stomach. At lunch, I did something I'd never done before. I drove to Blake's neighborhood. I told myself I was just curious, that I wanted to see where these healing sessions were taking place. Blake lived about 20 minutes from our house, in a development of custom homes built around a small lake. The houses were expensive but not ostentatious, the kind of place successful professionals moved when they wanted space and privacy. I found his address easily enough. The house was a sprawling ranch style with lots of windows facing the water. There was a deck wrapping around the back, and I could see the hot tub Sienna had mentioned. It looked peaceful and isolated, the perfect place for intimate conversations and whatever else might follow. I sat in my car for about 10 minutes, feeling like a stalker and hating myself for it. But I also felt something else. Certainty. This wasn't the kind of place you brought someone for casual friendship. This was a seduction location, designed for privacy and romance. I drove back to work with my hands gripping the steering wheel and my mind racing. That evening, Sienna was in an unusually good mood. She'd had a successful day showing houses, and she was full of stories about difficult clients and competitive offers. It was the most animated I'd seen her in weeks, and for a moment I let myself hope that maybe I was wrong about everything. "Oh, I forgot to mention," she said, as we cleaned up after dinner. "Blake called this afternoon. He's having a really hard day tomorrow, so I might need to go over there after work." The hope died as quickly as it had bloomed. On a Tuesday? Emotional crises don't follow a schedule, David. If someone you cared about was struggling, wouldn't you want to help them? I guess it depends on who it was and what kind of help they needed. She turned to face me, and her expression was carefully neutral. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing. I just think it's interesting that Blake's crises always seem to require your physical presence. Can't you help him over the phone? Some things can't be handled over the phone. Like what? Like being present for someone who's in pain, like offering comfort and support when they need it most. Her voice was getting sharper, like being the kind of person who actually cares about others. There it was again, the implication that I was selfish and uncaring because I didn't want my wife spending all her free time with her ex-husband. I care about you, I said quietly. Do you? Because lately it feels like you just want to control me. I want to understand what's happening to our marriage. Sienna set down the dish she'd been drying and looked at me with something that might have been pity. Nothing's happening to our marriage, David. I'm just trying to be a good person. If you can't support that, then maybe we need to talk about what that means. She went upstairs after that, leaving me alone in the kitchen with the dishes and the growing certainty that my marriage was already over. I waited until I heard the shower running, then went to my office and opened my laptop. Time for some real investigation. I started with phone records. Our cellular plan gave me access to detailed billing information, including call logs and text message counts. What I found made my blood run cold. Over the past 3 months, Sienna had exchanged over 2,000 text messages with Blake's number. Some days showed 40 or 50 messages back and forth. The pattern was consistent. Heavy texting during work hours, tapering off in the evening when she was home with me, then picking up again after I went to bed. The phone calls were even more telling. Long conversations, sometimes lasting hours, usually late at night or early in the morning. Times when I was asleep or at work. I printed out the records and studied them like a puzzle. The frequency and timing painted a clear picture of two people who were in constant contact, sharing intimate details of their daily lives, maintaining a connection that went far beyond casual friendship or therapeutic support. But I needed more than phone records. I needed proof of what was actually happening during those weekend visits. I thought about hiring a private investigator, but that felt like a step too far. Besides, I had skills of my own. I was a systems analyst. I knew how to gather and interpret data. The next morning, after Sienna left for work, I went through her home office. She kept meticulous records of her real estate business, but I wasn't interested in her professional files. I was looking for something more personal. I found it in her desk drawer, a small notebook with handwritten entries. At first glance, it looked like a journal, but as I read more carefully, I realized it was something else entirely. It was a record of her visits with Blake, written in a kind of code that she probably thought was clever. B struggling with trust issues, long conversation by the fire, made progress. Helped B work through intimacy fears, breakthrough moment in the hot tub. B finally opening up about what he really needs. So glad I can be there for him. The entries went back 4 months, not 3 like she'd told me. And reading between the lines, it was clear that these weren't therapy sessions. They were dates. Romantic encounters disguised as emotional support. I photographed each page with my phone, my hands shaking with rage and betrayal. That evening, Sienna announced that she needed to visit Blake again. He's having panic attacks, she said. His therapist thinks he needs consistent support from people he trusts. I thought you said he wasn't ready for therapy. She paused, and I saw her realize the contradiction. He started seeing someone last week, but the therapist says family and friends are crucial to his recovery. Family and friends. Which one are you? I'm someone who cares about his well-being. I nodded and went back to reading the newspaper, as if her answer made perfect sense. But inside, I was making plans. I followed her. I know how that sounds. I know it makes me the paranoid, controlling husband in this story. But after weeks of lies and half-truths, after finding that journal and seeing those phone records, I needed to know what was really happening during these compassion visits. I waited until her BMW disappeared around the corner, then got in my Honda and followed at a distance. She drove straight to Blake's house, just like she said she would. I parked down the street where I could see his driveway through the trees. Sienna's car was there for 6 hours. 6 hours of providing emotional support to a man having panic attacks. 6 hours of therapeutic conversation and compassionate listening. I sat in my car until my back ached and my legs cramped, watching that house and imagining what was happening inside. Every light that went on or off felt like a knife twist. When the deck lights came on around 9 p.m., I knew they were outside, probably in that hot tub, probably not discussing his therapy. She came home at 11:30, looking relaxed and slightly disheveled. Her hair was damp. "How's Blake?" I asked. "Better." The panic attack seemed to be subsiding. She headed straight for the stairs. "I'm exhausted. Going to bed." "Did his therapist give him any new coping strategies?" She paused on the bottom step. "What?" "You mentioned his therapist recommended support from family and friends. I was wondering what other advice they gave him." "Oh, right, yes, breathing exercises, mindfulness techniques, that sort of thing." "Sounds helpful." "Very helpful. Very." "Good night, David." I waited until I heard our bedroom door close, then went to my office and opened my laptop. Time to do what I did best: research. Blake Callahan's online presence was extensive, probably because he was trying to build his life coaching business. I found his website, his social media profiles, and several professional directories where he'd listed his services. What I didn't find was any mention of therapy or therapists. No posts about healing from divorce trauma. No inspirational content about overcoming panic attacks. Instead, his recent posts were all about finding your authentic self and embracing life's possibilities and being open to unexpected connections. The most recent post, from earlier that evening, was a photo of a wine glass on his deck with the caption, "Grateful for unexpected blessings and the people who make healing possible. Authentic, blessed, new beginnings." The timestamp showed it was posted around 9 p.m., right when those deck lights had come on. I screenshot everything and saved it to a folder on my desktop. Evidence was piling up, but I still didn't have the smoking gun I needed. That came 3 days later, completely by accident. Sienna had left her iPad on the kitchen counter while she showered. She usually took it everywhere, but she was running late for an appointment and forgot it in her rush to get ready. I wasn't planning to snoop. I was just moving it so I could wipe down the counter. But the screen lit up when I touched it, and I saw a text notification from Blake. "Last night was incredible. Can't wait for this weekend." My hands moved without conscious thought, opening the message thread. What I found there destroyed any remaining doubt about what was happening during those compassion visits. Months of messages, explicit photos, detailed planning for their weekend encounters, discussion of how to handle David's suspicions and keep their relationship secret until Blake was financially stable enough for Sienna to leave me. I read every message, screenshotting as I went, my heart pounding so hard I thought I might pass out. The betrayal was complete and calculated. They'd been planning this for months, using his supposed emotional crisis as cover for an affair that was clearly sexual and romantic. But the worst part wasn't the affair itself. It was reading Sienna's messages about me, how I was boring and predictable, how she'd outgrown our marriage but needed to stay until Blake got his coaching business off the ground, how they laughed about my pathetic attempts to figure out what was going on. I was still sitting in the kitchen, staring at the iPad, when Sienna came downstairs. "David? What are you doing?" I looked up at her. She was beautiful, as always. Perfectly styled hair, flawless makeup, expensive clothes that I'd helped pay for. She looked like the successful, confident woman I'd fallen in love with. But now I could see the calculation behind her smile, the coldness in her green eyes. "Blake texted you," I said. Her face went pale, then flushed red. "You went through my messages?" It lit up when I moved it. I saw the notification. "That doesn't give you the right to invade my privacy." I almost laughed. Privacy. After months of lies and deception, she was worried about privacy. "How long has this been going on?" I asked. She crossed her arms and lifted her chin defiantly. "I don't know what you think you saw, but I saw everything, Sienna. The photos, the planning, the discussions about leaving me once Blake gets his business established." For a moment, she looked like she might deny it all. Then something shifted in her expression, and I saw the real Sienna emerge from behind the mask she'd been wearing. "Fine," she said. "Yes, Blake and I are together. We're in love, David. We always have been. Divorcing him was the biggest mistake I ever made." "So you decided to cheat on me instead of just asking for a divorce?" "It's not that simple. Blake needed time to get back on his feet. I couldn't just abandon him when he was struggling." "But you could abandon me." "Our marriage has been over for years, David. We both know that. We're just going through the motions." I stared at her, this woman I'd shared a bed with for 8 years, and realized I didn't know her at all. "The compassion visits," I said. "The therapy story, the panic attacks, all lies." "Not lies, creative truth. Blake was struggling, and I was helping him, just not in the way you thought." "Creative truth." I repeated the phrase, tasting its bitter absurdity. "Is that what we're calling adultery now?" "Call it whatever you want, David. The point is, we're done pretending. Blake and I are going to be together, and you need to accept that." Just like that. Just like that. She started to walk away, then turned back. "Oh, and David, Blake and I are going away for the weekend to discuss our future. I'll be back Sunday to start making arrangements." "Arrangements for what?" "For our divorce, obviously. It's time to make this official." She left me sitting in the kitchen with her iPad and the wreckage of our marriage. I should have felt devastated. I should have been angry or hurt or desperate to save what we'd built together. Instead, I felt something unexpected. Relief. The uncertainty was over. The gaslighting and manipulation had ended. I finally knew exactly where I stood, and for the first time in months, I could think clearly. I had work to do. The first person I called was my sister Rebecca. "I need a lawyer," I said without preamble when she answered. "Well, hello to you too, David. What kind of lawyer?" "Divorce, a really good one." There was silence on the other end of the line. Rebecca was 3 years older than me and had always been protective, even when we were kids. She'd never particularly liked Sienna, though she'd been diplomatic about it for my sake. "What happened?" she asked. I told her everything. The weekend visits, the journal, the text messages, the confession. Rebecca listened without interrupting, which was unusual for her. She was typically full of questions and opinions. "Jesus, David," she said when I finished. "I'm so sorry." "Don't be sorry. Just help me find a lawyer who can make sure she doesn't take everything." "I know just the person, Amanda Chen. She handled my friend Lisa's divorce last year. Absolutely ruthless, but in a good way. She'll protect your assets and make sure Sienna can't screw you over financially." "Can you call her today?" "I'll call her right now." "But David, are you okay? This is a lot to process." I thought about that question. Was I okay? My wife had been cheating on me for months, lying to my face, planning to leave me for her ex-husband. By any reasonable measure, I should be falling apart. "I'm angry," I said, "but I'm also relieved. At least now I know what I'm dealing with." "That's very mature of you." "I don't feel mature. I feel like burning everything down." "Don't do anything stupid, David. Let Amanda handle the legal stuff. You just focus on taking care of yourself." After I hung up with Rebecca, I called in sick to work and spent the day documenting everything I'd discovered. I printed out the phone records, organized the screenshots from Sienna's iPad, and wrote a detailed timeline of events. If this was going to be a war, I wanted to be prepared. Amanda Chen called me back that afternoon. "Rebecca filled me in on the basics," she said. "I'm sorry you're going through this, but I want you to know that we can protect your interests. Do you have documentation of the affair?" Screenshots of text messages and photos, months of evidence. Good. That will help with the settlement. Massachusetts is a no-fault divorce state, but adultery can still affect property division, especially if marital assets were used to support the affair. What do you mean? If your wife was spending money on her boyfriend, using joint accounts to pay for hotels or gifts or trips, that can be considered dissipation of marital assets. We can ask for reimbursement. I thought about Blake's expensive wine, the dinners out, the weekend getaways that Sienna had probably been financing with our joint credit cards. I'll need to go through our financial records, I said. Do that, but be careful. Don't do anything that could be construed as hiding assets or interfering with her access to accounts. We want to be completely above board. What about the house? That's more complicated. How long have you been married? 8 years. We bought the house 6 years ago. Both names on the mortgage and deed? Yes. Then it's marital property, subject to division. But if you can prove she was planning to leave anyway, and especially if she was using marital funds to support her affair, we might be able to negotiate a favorable settlement. We talked for another 20 minutes about strategy and next steps. Amanda was professional and reassuring, but she was also clear about the reality of divorce proceedings. This is going to be expensive and emotionally draining, she said. Your wife will probably try to paint you as controlling or abusive to justify her behavior. Be prepared for that. She's already started. She says I'm trying to control her by questioning the affair. Classic deflection. Document everything, David. Every conversation, every text message, every interaction. And whatever you do, don't lose your temper. Don't give her ammunition to use against you. That evening, I waited for Sienna to come home. She walked in around 7, looking defiant and slightly nervous. I've retained a lawyer, I said without preamble. She stopped in the hallway and stared at me. That was fast. I believe in being efficient. David, we don't have to make this ugly. We can handle this like adults. Like adults? The way you handled our marriage? Her jaw tightened. I know you're angry, but I'm not angry, Sienna. I'm done. You want a divorce? You'll get one. But it's going to be fair, and it's going to be based on the truth of what happened here. What's that supposed to mean? It means my lawyer is very interested in your text messages with Blake, particularly the ones where you discuss using marital funds to support your relationship with him. The color drained from her face. You can't use those. That's a violation of my privacy. Actually, I can. They were on a device that I helped pay for, sent using a phone plan that's in my name. And adultery has consequences in divorce proceedings, even in no-fault states. She sank into a chair, and for the first time since this whole thing started, she looked genuinely worried. What do you want, David? I want honesty. I want fairness. And I want you to understand that actions have consequences. Are you trying to punish me? I'm trying to protect myself from someone who's spent months lying to me and planning to destroy our marriage. We stared at each other across the living room that we'd decorated together, chosen furniture for together, made a home in together. All of that was ending, and we both knew it. I'll be staying at Blake's this weekend, she said finally. I assumed you would be. When I get back, we need to talk about logistics. Who's staying in the house, how we're handling the bills, that sort of thing. My lawyer will be in touch with yours. She nodded and went upstairs. I heard her packing, moving around our bedroom, taking things that belonged to her. An hour later, she came back downstairs with 2 suitcases. I'll get the rest of my things next week, she said. Fine. She paused at the door, and for a moment I thought she might apologize, or try to explain, or show some sign that 8 years of marriage had meant something to her. Instead, she said, I hope you can find a way to be happy, David. You deserve that. Then she was gone, and I was alone in our house with the silence and the growing realization that my old life was over. But maybe that wasn't such a bad thing. Sienna's lawyer turned out to be exactly what I'd expected: expensive, aggressive, and completely uninterested in the truth. Margaret Walsh had a reputation for scorched-earth divorce tactics and getting maximum settlements for her clients, regardless of the circumstances. The first salvo came in the form of a letter demanding that I vacate our house immediately to give Sienna space to process the emotional trauma of our separation. According to Walsh, my controlling and invasive behavior had made it impossible for Sienna to feel safe in her own home. Amanda Chen laughed when I showed her the letter. "Standard intimidation tactics," she said. "They're trying to establish a narrative where you're the bad guy and she's the victim. We're not going to let that happen." What do? We respond with facts. I'm drafting a letter that includes selected excerpts from your wife's text messages with her boyfriend. Let's see how they like dealing with evidence instead of accusations. While Amanda handled the legal maneuvering, I focused on something else, making sure everyone knew the truth about why our marriage was ending. Sienna had always been concerned about her image. As a successful realtor in a relatively small city, her reputation was crucial to her business. She'd built her brand around being trustworthy, reliable, and professional. The idea of being known as someone who'd cheated on her husband would be devastating to her. I started subtly. When our neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, asked why Sienna's car hadn't been in the driveway lately, I told her the truth. Sienna's been staying with her ex-husband. They're working on getting back together. When my coworker Jenny asked how I was handling the separation, I said, "It's been difficult discovering that your wife has been having an affair, but I'm managing." When Sienna's friend Carol called the house looking for her, I explained that Sienna was focusing on her relationship with Blake now and suggested she try his number. Word spread quickly. In a city of 60,000 people, news travels fast, especially when it involves someone as visible as Sienna. Within a week, I was getting sympathetic calls from friends and acquaintances who'd heard about the affair. But the real breakthrough came when I ran into Tom Bradley at the grocery store. Tom was a mortgage broker who'd helped us buy our house 6 years ago. He was also one of Blake's closest friends, which made the conversation that followed particularly interesting. "David, hey," Tom said, looking uncomfortable. "I heard about you and Sienna. I'm really sorry, man." "Thanks, Tom. It's been a difficult time. Look, I probably shouldn't say this, but Blake's been talking about this for months. The whole thing with Sienna, I mean. He's been pretty smug about it." I stopped pushing my cart and looked at Tom more carefully. "What do you mean?" Tom glanced around, making sure we weren't overheard. "He's been bragging about stealing your wife, talking about how easy it was to manipulate her, how she was paying for everything while he got his business off the ground. He called you a clueless loser who deserved what you got." The anger that hit me was white-hot and immediate. It was one thing to know that my wife had been cheating. It was another to learn that her boyfriend had been mocking me to his friends. He said that? Multiple times. At poker games. At the bar. Blake's always been kind of an asshole, but this was next-level cruel. A lot of us were pretty disgusted by it. "Why are you telling me this?" Tom shifted uncomfortably. "Because you seem like a decent guy, and what they're doing to you isn't right. Blake's telling everyone that you were abusive and controlling, that Sienna had to sneak around because she was afraid of you. But that doesn't match up with the guy who's been bragging about seducing your wife for months." This was exactly what Amanda had warned me about. Sienna and Blake were trying to rewrite history, making me the villain in their story. "Would you be willing to repeat what you just told me to my lawyer?" I asked. Tom hesitated. "I don't want to get involved in a messy divorce." "You're already involved, Tom. Blake made you involved when he used you as an audience for his bragging. The question is whether you're going to let him get away with lying about what really happened." He thought about it for a moment, then nodded. "Yeah, okay. If it helps set the record straight, I'll talk to your lawyer." That conversation led to others. Tom introduced me to 2 other friends of Blake's who'd been uncomfortable with his behavior. Both of them agreed to provide statements about Blake's bragging, and his derogatory comments about me. But the real coup came when I discovered something Blake and Sienna had forgotten about. Social media. Blake's Instagram account was public, part of his effort to build his life coaching brand. Most of his posts were generic inspirational content, but buried in his stories and tagged photos was a treasure trove of evidence. Photos of expensive dinners at restaurants I recognized from our credit card statements. Pictures of weekend trips that Sienna had paid for with our joint accounts. Images of gifts and flowers and wine that had been purchased with marital funds. I downloaded everything and handed it over to Amanda, who was delighted. "This is perfect," she said. "We can prove that your wife was using marital assets to support her affair. That's dissipation of marital property, and it's going to cost her in the settlement." "How much?" "Potentially a lot. If we can document $50,000 in marital funds used to support her relationship with Blake, she could owe you $25,000 in reimbursement, plus we can argue for a larger share of the remaining assets." The number was staggering. I'd known Sienna was spending money on Blake, but I hadn't realized the extent of it. "There's something else," Amanda said. "Margaret Walsh called me yesterday. They want to negotiate." "Already?" "They're worried about the evidence we have. The text messages, the witness statements, the financial records. Walsh knows that if this goes to trial, her client is going to look terrible." "What kind of negotiation?" "They're offering you 60% of the house equity in exchange for keeping the affair evidence out of court proceedings. They want to avoid the public embarrassment." I thought about that offer. 60% of our house equity would be a substantial amount of money, enough to buy a smaller place outright and start over. But it also meant letting Sienna escape the consequences of her choices. "What do you recommend?" "Honestly, take the deal. You'll come out ahead financially, and you won't have to go through the stress of a trial. Sometimes the best revenge is living well." But I wasn't interested in living well. I was interested in justice. What if we don't take the deal? What if we let this play out publicly? Amanda leaned back in her chair and studied me carefully. "Then you're looking at months of legal proceedings, tens of thousands in attorney fees, and a lot of public scrutiny. Yes, Sienna will be embarrassed, but you'll be dragged through it too. Are you prepared for that?" I thought about Blake bragging to his friends about stealing my wife, about Sienna calling me boring and pathetic in her text messages, about months of lies and manipulation, and being made to feel like I was crazy for questioning what was obviously an affair. "Yeah," I said. "I'm prepared for that." Amanda smiled. "In that case, let's give them something to really worry about." The call came on a Thursday evening in late November. I was grading papers in my home office when my phone rang, showing Sienna's number. "Hello, Sienna." "David, we need to talk." Her voice sounded strained, almost desperate. It had been 3 weeks since she'd moved out, 3 weeks of legal maneuvering and increasingly hostile negotiations between our lawyers. "I'm listening." "Not over the phone. Can you meet me somewhere, please?" There was something in her tone that I hadn't heard in months. Vulnerability. The confident, defiant woman who'd walked out of our house had been replaced by someone who sounded genuinely worried. "Where?" "Russo's. Tomorrow night at 7. Russo's was the Italian restaurant where we'd had our first date 9 years ago. The symbolism wasn't lost on me. "Fine, but I'm bringing my lawyer." "David, please, just the two of us. One conversation. That's all I'm asking." Against my better judgment, I agreed. I arrived at Russo's 15 minutes early and chose a table in the back where we could talk privately. Sienna walked in precisely at 7, looking more nervous than I'd ever seen her. She'd lost weight, and there were dark circles under her eyes that makeup couldn't quite hide. "Thank you for coming," she said, sliding into the seat across from me. "What do you want, Sienna?" She fidgeted with her purse, avoiding eye contact. "I want to make a deal." "Your lawyer already made an offer. We declined." "Not a legal deal, a personal one." I waited for her to continue. "I know you're angry," she said. I know I hurt you, and I know the way I handled everything was wrong, but David, what you're doing now, it's destroying my life. I'm not doing anything except telling the truth. You're telling everyone about the affair. My clients know, my colleagues know. My mother called me yesterday crying because someone told her I was cheating on you. That's unfortunate. It's more than unfortunate, David. It's vindictive. You're trying to ruin my reputation and my business. I leaned back in my chair and studied her face. Do you remember what you told me about actions having consequences? This is different. How is it different? Because you're not just hurting me. You're hurting Blake, too. He's trying to build his business, and all this negative attention is making it impossible. There it was. The real reason for this meeting. Blake was feeling the pressure, and he'd sent Sienna to make it stop. That's really what this is about, isn't it? Blake's worried about his reputation. We're both worried. David, please. What do you want? Money? A bigger share of the house? I'll agree to whatever you ask. Just stop talking about the affair. What I want, I said slowly, is for you to understand what you put me through. Months of lies. Months of being made to feel crazy for questioning obvious inconsistencies in your stories. Months of being told I was controlling and paranoid while you were sneaking around with your ex-husband. I know I made mistakes. Mistakes? I laughed, and the sound was harsh even to my own ears. Sienna, you didn't make mistakes. You made choices, calculated, deliberate choices to betray your marriage and humiliate me. I never meant to humiliate you. But you did. And not just by having the affair, but by lying about it so badly that I looked like an idiot for believing you. Do you know what Blake's been telling his friends about me? She went very still. What do you mean? Tom Bradley told me. Blake's been bragging about stealing my wife, calling me a clueless loser who deserved what I got. Is that how you see me too, Sienna? As some pathetic fool who was too stupid to realize what was happening? No, David, that's not. Because that's what your text messages suggested. All those conversations where you and Blake laughed about my pathetic attempts to figure out what was going on. She was crying now, tears streaming down her face in a way that would have moved me 6 months ago. Now it just looked like manipulation. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry. I know I can't take it back, but I am genuinely sorry for hurting you. Are you sorry for hurting me, or are you sorry that there are consequences for your actions? She didn't answer, which was an answer in itself. Here's what's going to happen, I said. We're going to proceed with the divorce exactly as planned. All the evidence is going to come out in court proceedings, which means it's going to become public record. Your affair, Blake's bragging, the money you spent on him using our joint accounts, all of it. David, please. And when it's over, you and Blake can have your relationship without any interference from me. But you're going to own what you did. Both of you. I stood up to leave, but Sienna grabbed my arm. What if I left him? She said desperately. What if I ended things with Blake, and we tried to work this out? I looked down at her hand on my arm, then at her tear-stained face. For just a moment, I felt a flicker of the old affection I'd had for her. She looked small and broken and genuinely remorseful. Then I remembered the text messages, the lies, the months of being gaslit and manipulated. It's too late for that, I said gently. Way too late. I left her sitting in the restaurant and drove home to my empty house. But for the first time in months, the emptiness felt like freedom instead of loneliness. The divorce proceedings played out exactly as Amanda had predicted. Walsh tried to paint me as a vindictive ex-husband who was violating Sienna's privacy and harassing her for trying to end an unhappy marriage. But the evidence was overwhelming, and the witness statements from Blake's friends made it clear who the real victims were in this situation. The final settlement gave me 70% of our house equity, plus reimbursement for the marital funds Sienna had spent on Blake. She also had to pay both our legal fees, which totaled nearly $40,000. But the real victory wasn't financial. It was watching Sienna's carefully constructed image crumble as the truth came out. Her real estate business suffered as clients chose to work with agents they considered more trustworthy. Blake's life coaching venture never got off the ground, partly because potential clients kept finding news articles about his affair with a married woman. The last I heard, they'd moved to another state to start over. I hope they're happy together. I genuinely do. They deserve each other. As for me, I bought a smaller house closer to downtown and started dating again. It turns out that being honest about why your marriage ended isn't the relationship killer I thought it would be. Most women appreciated the straightforward approach, and several told me that my willingness to stand up for myself was attractive. I'm not bitter anymore. The anger that sustained me through the divorce proceedings has faded into something more like indifference. Sienna and Blake are part of my past now, and I'm focused on my future. But I learned something important from the whole experience. Sometimes the best revenge isn't moving on and living well. Sometimes it's making sure that people face the consequences of their choices, even when those consequences are uncomfortable. Especially when they're uncomfortable.